Good morning, guys. Okay, don't freak out. I know that you guys are looking at a black screen. I'm trying to read as much as possible, guys, for the remainder of the book. It has about 218 pages. We are currently on page 127. And sometimes, it's a lot to just hold the camera on the book, hold, record, and read and flip. So the last 14 videos, I have had it on the book. Today, if you guys will just allow me to just read, I'll go faster that way and kind of give you guys more. Sometimes that's why I'm not able to, record longer, because it's like a whole process with the reading, which I don't mind doing that for you guys, but I'm trying to get this book read before the end of the month so that in March we can begin the purpose-driven life, and I can continue on with the other things that we have to do. So guys, I'm going to read as much as possible in this video. I may even upload another video after this. I'm going to see, but I'm going to try to do as much as I can in this video. Prayerfully, there are no system updates. I believe this is video 14 or video 15 of the 4 seasons of marriage. If you guys missed any, feel free to go, on the replay on our playlist and check those out. But I'm going to continue on, guys. We're in strategy 5. We're on page 126. The strategy 5 is discover the joy of helping your spouse succeed. So I'm going to continue reading. So he said, I am forever indebted to my wife for supporting me when I went back to graduate school. She took care of our young daughter while I worked part-time and went to school. We lived on a shoestring. For 3 years, she never bought a pair of shoes or a new dress for herself. Her sacrificial actions made it possible for me to complete graduate school. I would like to think that whatever success I have experienced brings her a great deal of satisfaction, knowing that she is largely responsible for my successes. By the way, she now has plenty of shoes and dresses. What desires has your spouse expressed? What supportive actions would it require on your part to see those dreams become realities? Why not express your willingness to support your spouse, both with encouragement and with supportive action? Few things give greater joy than seeing your spouse reach his or her potential for good, for God, and for good. So then he has a box, guys. You guys that are used to following along with us with our reading, he has the box. And in this box is the 4 practical ways to help your spouse succeed. Number 1 is offer encouraging words. And you guys can treat this video this morning like an audio if you want, although it is like a recording live. Like if I turned it on me, you guys could see it, but I kind of just want you guys to focus on the book. But number 1 is offer encouraging words. Offer encouraging words. Number 2 is take supportive action. Take supportive action. Number 3 is provide emotional support. Provide emotional support. Number 4, express respect for your spouse. So I'll go over the 4 practical ways to help your spouse succeed. Number 1, offer encouraging words. Number 2, take supportive action. Number 3, provide emotional support. Number 4, express respect for your spouse. And we'll continue reading. I recently met a husband whose wife is a public speaker. He said, I gave up my job so I could travel with her. I take care of her books and tapes and luggage. My greatest joy is in seeing her do what she enjoys most. I feel that by serving her, I am serving God. Here is a husband who has discovered the joy of helping his spouse succeed. A third practical way to help your spouse succeed is by giving emotional support. Emotions, positive and negative, are gifts from God. How dull life would be if we were not able to feel. Try to imagine watching the sunset, a ball game, or the ocean and feeling no emotion. We would be something less than human if we had no feelings. We are made in the image of God, and part of what that means is that we are emotional creatures. Unlike thoughts, which ideally we can control, our emotions are not nearly as manageable. Feelings are unsolicited, interior, personal reactions to what goes on around us or to what has happened to us in the past. Feelings are as common as breathing, yet many people talk about feelings as enemies. We sometimes hear people say such things as, my emotions are about to destroy me. And guys, we're already on 128. Why do we pit ourselves against our emotions? One reason is that we have seen so many other people who have followed their emotions and reaped destruction. They have done what they felt like doing, and everyone around them suffered. Another reason we don't trust our feelings is that we know they change. They lift us up and they let us down. Our highs don't last and our lows seem to drag on forever. We conclude, therefore, that emotions are unreliable and that we must live independent of them if we are to have successes. Perhaps the chief reason we consider emotions our enemies is that negative emotions don't seem to fit in with being a joyful Christian. Anger, fear, disappointment, loneliness, frustration, depression, and sorrow don't fit the stereotype of successful Christian living. But have you considered that Jesus, as a man, experienced every human emotion, even the negative ones? Does that mean that Jesus was not a success? Hardly. Emotions are not intrinsically good or bad. Feelings are morally neutral. It is what we do in response to our feelings that characterizes them as good or bad, sinful or righteous. In response to anger, Jesus cleared the temple in Jerusalem of money changers and livestock, a very righteous act born out of his anger at sin. Negative and positive emotions are intended by God to be motivational instruments that move us in a positive direction. Whatever emotions we experience are good if they move us in the right direction. The emotions themselves are neutral. It is the results that will be positive or negative. Many Christians tend to deny their negative emotions. Said another way, many Christians are not willing to accept the fact that they have negative feelings. Others try to push their negative emotions onto the back burner and disregard them. It is far more productive to identify and accept our feelings and then to seek constructive ways of responding. Feelings are like thermometers. They report whether we are hot or cold, whether all is well or not so well. If all is well, then we can celebrate. If emotions indicate that all is not well, we can take positive action to correct the situation. And guys, bear with me 1 second. I'm going to have to charge my phone. I did record a video before this one, guys. And so I'm going to have to put this one on the charger so that I can pretty much fully read to you all. Let me find my thing. I'm going to pause it and then we'll jump back into the reading, guys. Just bear with me a second. Okay, and I hope that you guys can still hear me. I just wanted to put it on the charger because it was going a little low. Okay, so feelings are like thermometers. They report whether we are hot or cold, whether all is well or not so well. If all is well, then we can celebrate. If emotions indicate that all is not well, we can take positive action to correct the situation. Giving emotional support to your spouse begins by allowing positive and negative emotions. It means celebrating the positive emotions and affirming the negative emotions. To use the biblical phrase, it is rejoicing with those who rejoice and weeping with those who weep. Because of personality differences, we sometimes find this difficult. I remember the woman who said to me in the counseling office, "I don't understand my husband. Our baby has been sick for the last 3 months. My mother is battling cancer. The future of his job is uncertain. Yet he comes home excited that he got a 50 cents an hour pay raise." Because of her personality, her bent toward focusing on the negative, she had a hard time rejoicing with her husband over his small success. Instead, she said to him, "What good is that if you lose your job in 3 weeks?" He lashed out at her for being so negative and then left the room and remained silent for the rest of the evening. How different things might have been had she been emotionally supportive by saying something like, "Honey, that's great. That must mean that they like the way you do your job." By celebrating his small success, she would motivate him to pursue larger successes. By being emotionally supportive, she would be helping her husband succeed. When your spouse has negative emotions, such as anger, disappointment, depression, or sorrow, you can be emotionally supportive by affirming those emotions and expressing belief in your spouse. Myra came home from the doctor's office and told her husband, Mike, "The doctor said I might lose the baby. We won't know for another week or so, but it's not looking good. I feel so discouraged. I had hoped that this time everything would go well. I don't know what's wrong with me." She was feeling disappointment, frustration, and sadness, and she was focusing the blame on herself. If Mike wants to be emotionally supportive, he might say, "I can understand why you would feel disappointed. I feel that way too. It's frustrating when we both have tried so hard. When you say, I don't know what's wrong with me, though, it sounds like you are blaming yourself. I guess if I were in your shoes, I might feel the same way, but I want you to know that it is not the way I see it. I think you have done everything right. I think if something happens to this baby, we will have to trust God. I just want you to know that I love you and I will walk with you through this experience. Let's pray together. Mike is being emotionally supportive of Myra. He is allowing her to have feelings of disappointment and sadness. He is affirming her feelings by saying, if I were in your shoes, I might feel the same way. But he is being honest about his own perspective, and he is assuring her of his support no matter what. That is the kind of emotional support that often makes the difference between success and failure. A fourth way to foster success is by expressing respect for your spouse. Because we are made in the image of God, we are creatures of great value, male and female. Something deep within us affirms that we are creatures of respect and dignity, that God's imprint is upon us. Consequently, demeaning words and behavior make us feel violated. When words and actions affirm our inherent worth, we feel respected. Respect begins with an attitude. I acknowledge that you are a creature of extreme worth. God has endowed you with certain abilities, insights, and spiritual gifts. Therefore, I respect you as a person. I will not desecrate your worth by making critical remarks about your intellect, your judgment, or your logic. I will seek to understand and grant you the freedom to think different from the way I think and to experience emotions that I may not experience. An attitude of respect paves the way for you to show respect for your mate. Respect does not indicate that you agree on everything, but it does mean that you give your spouse the freedom to be an individual. No two humans are alike in the way they think and feel. Respect says, that's an interesting way to look at it, not that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I am often amazed at how inhumanely spouses sometimes treat each other. I remember one man who said to his wife, I can't believe that you are a college graduate and think so illogically. Such degrading statements create animosity, not respect. Allowing your spouse to be who God created him or her to be is the first step toward communicating respect. Trying to argue your spouse into compliance with your own views shows disrespect. To show respect is to look for your mate's God-given giftedness and to affirm and encourage his or her uniqueness. Respect gives people the freedom to be who they are, to think what they think, and to feel what they feel. A wife does not expect her husband to agree with her all the time, but neither does she expect him to call her ideas stupid. A husband knows he is not always right, but he doesn't want to be called a liar. We can express disagreement respectfully. A wife might say to her husband, honey, I don't agree with you, but I know there must be good reasons why you see it that way. When you have time, I would like to hear more of your thoughts on that. A husband might say to his wife, I'm sorry that you feel hurt. That was certainly not my intention. Can we talk about it? I met Jonathan in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. He came to my seminar alone. At one of the breaks, he said to me, how can I respect my wife when she doesn't live a respectable lifestyle? Lisa has been unfaithful to me at least twice, and I'm not sure what's going on now. I've lost all respect for her. Jonathan raises a very significant question. Not everyone lives a life that is worthy of respect, but we can still respect the inherent worth of the person. Though he couldn't respect Lisa's ungodly lifestyle, he could still respect Lisa, not for what she did, but for who she is. Regardless of her behavior, she was made in the image of God and thus is extremely valuable. We must acknowledge that God has given his creatures freedom of choice. Even when people make poor choices, it does not diminish their value as human beings. We're on page 132, guys. When Jonathan's wife sinned against him, it brought pain not only to his heart, but also to the heart of God for one simple reason. God and Jonathan both love Lisa and both know that her behavior is detrimental to her and to their relationship with her. However, if Jonathan puts her down by saying, I can't believe you would do this, you're such a scumbag, I hate you, he's not pushing her toward success, but toward failure. Lisa is not a scumbag. She is a creature of God for whom Jesus died. She has great potential for good and needs God's redemptive touch. How might Jonathan express respect for his wife in the midst of her failure? He could say, I'm sure you know that your behavior is hurting me deeply. But what really concerns me is that I know your behavior ultimately will hurt you, and I care about you. In my mind, you are a wonderful person with great potential, and I want to help you reach that potential. I know you must make your own decisions. I'm not trying to control your life. I'm just telling you how much I value you and how much I love you. Jonathan's respect for Lisa's inherent worth as a human being may well bring her to value herself. And ultimately, she may return to God and to Jonathan. If that happens, he will have the joy of forgiving her and cooperating with God and seeing her life redeemed. In his marriage, he will have the pleasure of watching the ice and snow of winter recede as the warming winds of spring begin to take hold. Regardless of what season your marriage is in, when you discover the joy of helping your spouse succeed, you will begin to establish or restore emotional health, respect, support, and encouragement in your marriage. Watching your spouse succeed is one of the great joys of marriage. It is my conviction that marriage is based on the divine principle that two are better than one. In the very beginning, God said it is not good for the man to be alone. God's answer to Adam's aloneness was the creation of Eve and the institution of marriage. His intention was that the two would become one flesh. This does not mean that in marriage we lose our identity as individuals, but it does mean that we choose to give our lives away for the benefit of the other. When this happens, we both succeed. Together, we accomplish more than either one of us could have accomplished alone. The ultimate purpose of marriage is not sex or happiness or even love. The ultimate purpose of marriage is that a husband and wife will help each other accomplish the purpose for which God created them. When this happens, both spouses experience the ultimate joy of cooperating with God to accomplish his purposes. So guys, we just read from 126 to 133. And that concludes the strategy 5. Now we're on strategy 6, which is maximize your differences. Let me give you guys the rest of what we're going to be reading the rest of this month for the remainder of the book. We're going to be reading strategy 6 is maximize your differences. That's what we're reading now. Strategy 7 is the last strategy. It is implement the power of positive influence. After that, we're jumping into part 3, which is putting your plan into practice. And it's moving forward from here and now. Then he has the 4 seasons Q&A. And then part 4 is the end of the book, the 4 seasons of marriage study guide. So there's a study guide at the end. It's part 1, part 2, and part 3. But so far, what we went over the introduction. We went over part 1, the 4 seasons of marriage, the nature of marriage. We talked about winter. We talked about spring. We talked about summer. We talked about fall. And we did a marital seasons profile. We read part 2, which is the 7 strategies to enhance the seasons of your marriage. We read about strategy 1, deal with past failures. We read about strategy 2, choose a winning attitude. We read about strategy 3, learn to speak your spouse's love language. We read about strategy 4, develop the awesome power of empathetic listening. And we just concluded strategy 5, which is discover the joy of helping your spouse succeed. Now we're in strategy 6, which is maximize your differences. And for you following along with me in the book, this is page 135. In the fall season of marriage, our differences begin to be magnified. In the winter season, they stand as icy walls that divide us. For example, when Gerald's marriage was in the fall season, he was mildly irritated by the way Marcy loaded the dishwasher. But when winter took hold, he became livid every time he opened the dishwasher door and saw the chaos. In God's plan, our differences were never intended to divide us. In fact, God is the author of diversity. Somebody say diversity. No two snowflakes, fingerprints, or leaves on a tree are exactly alike. When God created mankind, he built into our genetic structure the potential for unlimited diversity. When he instituted marriage as a union of two unique individuals, he knew that he was creating unity out of diversity. Not only are we different because we're male and female, we're different in every aspect of life. Try taking a walk with your spouse, and you'll soon discover that you walk at a different pace and with a different gait. Sit down for a rest and you'll notice that the two of you sit differently. Engage in a conversation and you'll discover that your thoughts are extremely diverse. Set out to accomplish a task such as mowing the grass, vacuuming the carpet, or changing a diaper, and you'll find that each of you has a unique approach. Even our personalities are different. One spouse may be optimistic, whereas the other is pessimistic. One is quiet, the other is talkative. One is logical and this word, I always get stuck on this verb. Methodical. The other is intuitive. One tends to be organized with everything in its place. The other spends half a lifetime just looking for keys. After years of arguing about differences, each trying to convince the other that his or her way is the best way, couples often conclude that they are incompatible. In fact, incompatibility or irreconcilable differences is often given as the grounds for divorce. After 30 years of counseling married couples, I am convinced there are no irreconcilable differences, only people who refuse to reconcile. In God's mind, our differences are designed to be complementary, not to cause conflicts. This principle is illustrated by the Christian church described in 1 Corinthians 12 as being similar to the human body, composed of ears, eyes, legs, feet, hands, arms, and so forth. Each member of the church is seen as an important part of the body. When everyone works in unity, each part enhances the others, and together they serve the purposes of God. Similarly, in the institution of marriage, God intends for husbands and wives to bring their unique characteristics together to form one team that will work together under God's direction to accomplish His eternal purposes. God designed our differences to be assets, not liabilities. When we learn to maximize our differences for the benefit of the marriage, we align our lives with God's purposes. The Bible calls this marital unity. When each spouse recognizes and affirms the other's uniqueness, the differences themselves will the couple into an unbeatable team. So how do we tap into this reality in our marriages? How do we maximize our differences in order to move from fall or winter into spring or summer? And now we're going to get into identify your differences. The process begins with identifying your differences. If you and your spouse are going to maximize your unique qualities, you need to know the ways in which you're different. This is not a difficult task, but it will require some time and thought. The most obvious differences will be those that are the most irritating. Therefore, one way to identify your differences is to make a list of all the things that irritate you about your spouse. After you've made your list, ask yourself 2 questions. Why do these things irritate me? What differences do these irritations reveal? In most cases, the reason you get irritated is because your spouse doesn't do something the way you would do it. You and your spouse are simply different in these areas, and thus far in your marriage, you have seen these differences as irritations. But let's look a little deeper to identify the differences that these irritations reveal. For example, why was Gerald irritated by the way Marcy loaded the dishwasher? Very likely it was because he tends to be organized in his approach to life, whereas Marcy tends to be spontaneous, a common difference observed in many married couples. This difference will show up not only in how they load the dishwasher, but in other aspects of life as well. The following list of common differences between husbands and wives may help you identify some of the differences in your own marriage. Okay, number 1. Talkers often marry people who are quiet and reflective. Number 2. Early risers often marry those who don't do mornings. Number 3. People who like to make things happen often marry people who enjoy reading about what happens. Number 4. People who live by the philosophy, a place for everything and everything in its place, often marry those whose most common question is, where is it? Number 5. Planners often marry people who want to work out the details as they go along. Number 6. Homebodies often marry partygoers. Number 7. People who say, let's be logical, often marry those who say, but it doesn't feel right. Number 8. Penny pinchers often marry spenders who say, you can't take it with you. Number 9. Avid readers often marry TV addicts. Number 10. Joggers often marry swimmers. Number 11. Channel surfers often marry commercial watchers. And number 12. And somehow country western devotees marry symphony lovers. I am sure you can add to this list, but perhaps it will get you started in identifying your differences. So now, guys, we're getting into look for assets in your differences. And guys, we are on page 138. Look for assets in your differences. Every difference has a positive side. We don't have to see our differences as irritations. For example, Joe is by nature a couch potato. His wife Millie is a butterfly who is always doing something. She seldom simply sits. In the past, she viewed Joe as lazy. He viewed her as a nervous female who can't relax. They often had words over this difference, but most of the time they simply lived with the low-grade resentment of each other. In my office, Joe said, "Why can't she relax and have fun? Life is short. We don't need to work all the time." Millie responded, "But there is so much that needs to be done. I can't believe he can sit there and watch television and leave everything for me to do." What difference do these irritations reveal? For you following me, we're on page 139. It appears that Joe by nature tends to take a more relaxed and laid-back approach to life, whereas Millie by nature is an activist and tends to be very conscientious. Her theme is, why sit still when you can be doing something productive? Joe's theme is, why work when you can relax? Now that this difference has been identified, let's look for the assets. What is the positive side to Joe's approach to life? He reminds me of the old adage, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. He brings to the table the idea that life is to be enjoyed and that there is to be a balance between work and relaxation. Incidentally, the Bible strongly supports this attitude. God himself worked 6 days and rested on the seventh, and he instructs us to do the same. Scripture also says that life involves a balance between numerous activities. God has made everything beautiful in its time. On the other hand, what asset does Millie bring to the equation? Her approach to life reminds us that we each have a solemn responsibility to work. Life is not a bowl of cherries. It requires discipline and determination. The Bible supports this idea. The Apostle Paul said, "If a man will not work, he shall not eat." Scripture also warns against the dangers of idleness. When we look for the positive side of our differences, we have taken a step in the direction of maximizing our differences. What about differences that involve immoral behavior? For example, he lies, she doesn't. She finds his lies extremely irritating, and he finds her commitment to truth equally irritating. It is my conviction that there is no asset in immoral behavior. Such behavior calls for repentance and forgiveness, which in turn and in time lead to reconciliation. We discussed this process as part of Strategy 1 when we talked about dealing with past failures. Most of the differences that irritate us in the normal flow of life do not involve immorality. They are simply expressions of our unique design, and there is always a positive side to our uniqueness. If we are to maximize our differences in marriage, we must look for the assets. So now, guys, we're going to talk about learn from your differences. We're on page 140. Remember, God's design for our differences is that they be complementary. They are not intended to divide us, but to unite us. Ask God to show you what you need to learn from your differences. Millie needs to learn that life is more than work. For the benefit of her mental and marital health, she may need to take time to sit with Joe and relax while watching a movie. Perhaps she can learn more about the rhythm of work and relaxation. To do so will enrich her life and her marriage. On the other hand, perhaps Joe can learn that as a husband who cares for his wife as Christ cares for the church, he needs to take more initiative to help her do things around the house. If he takes the servant attitude of Christ, he may well ask her, "What could I do to help you this evening?" Doing those things before he sits down to relax may make it easier for her to sit down with him. There are always lessons to be learned from our differences. None of us has reached the apex of Christian maturity. God's intention is that marriage will stimulate our spiritual, intellectual, and emotional growth. When we look for the lessons in our differences, we will find them and benefit from them. Now, guys, we're on page 141, and we're talking about replace condemnation with affirmation. A key aspect of learning from our differences is replacing condemnation with affirmation. When we view our differences as irritations, we typically deliver sermons of condemnation to our spouse. "I can't believe you are so lazy," or "Why can't you sit down and relax with me? Why do you always have to be doing something?" Such criticisms perpetuate the winter season of marriage and build icy blocks of resentment. However, once we understand that our differences are designed to be positive, not negative, we can replace condemnation with words of affirmation. Millie might begin by saying, I know that I have gotten upset with you in the past about how much time you spend in front of the television and how you don't help me with the things around the house. But I'm beginning to realize that God made us different for a purpose, and I need to learn from you how to relax and enjoy life more and not be so obsessed with getting everything done. So I want to thank you for being the person you are. Such an affirming statement may even solicit a hug from Joe. Whatever his response, he now feels more accepted by her. Joe might begin by saying, I know that in the past, I've been critical of you for how you're always on the move, never stopping to smell the roses. But I'm beginning to realize that God made us different for a purpose. And I want you to know that I appreciate all your hard work and how you keep things flowing smoothly around here. I know you would like me to help you from time to time, and I want to do that more often. Both partners in a marriage need to feel appreciation rather than condemnation. Mutual affirmation creates an atmosphere for positive change. By now, you have no doubt begun to see how the various strategies can work together to move a marriage out of a fall or winter season and into spring or summer. Regardless of where you're starting, there is always a positive first step you can take to begin changing the season of your marriage. And guys, in the next video, we're going to conclude strategy 6. We're on page 142. We're going to talk about discover a plan for maximizing your differences, 5 steps to maximize your differences. Then we're already in strategy 7, which is implement the power of positive influence.